Time travels at its own pace in Key West, Florida. From the hustle and bustle of Duval Street to the quiet enjoyment of the beaches. Key West doesn't really feel, in many ways, like you're even in the United States. You feel more like you're in the Bahamas or in the Caymans. It's got its own sense of familiar and exotic that just combines to create a truly unique Key West experience. If you're headed to Key West, here are my top 5 tips for what to expect when you get there. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I've got a bonus tip for you. Hello everybody, welcome to Isler Window. My name is Brent and the goal of this channel is to make your travel experience the best it can possibly be. My first tip is if you're not from here, don't drive here. There are much better ways to get around Key West than in a car. Now, you can drive from Miami to Key West. You can go over the 7 Mile Bridge, and while it's probably a good idea to do that once in your life, if you are planning to do it, I'd recommend that you rent a car in Miami, drop it off in Key West, and then don't drive for the rest of the time you're here. Because while it can be really fun to drive across that bridge and you're just a few feet above the ocean, realize that there is nothing in between the Keys and in between Miami and Key West. So if something happens on that bridge, if there's a crash or a disabled car or there's a weather issue, you could potentially be stuck there for hours and hours. And if Arnold Schwarzenegger's anywhere in town, well, we all know what he does to that particular bridge. And if you look at flights, it's not much more expensive to fly directly into Key West than it is to Miami, particularly if you take into account the amount you have to spend to rent a car and the fuel and insurance and then all of the hassle that you have parking and managing that car while you're on vacation there in Key West. At less than 8 square miles in total land area, Key West is the perfect place to cycle. We rented bikes for $60 a piece for an entire week, and we never had to worry about parking, we never had to worry about traffic or getting to the car or worrying about what was happening to the car when we weren't around. In fact, the only times we didn't cycle were to and from the airport and to and from the wedding we attended, and that was only because we were wearing wedding attire and didn't want to cycle in a suit and a dress. My wife was wearing the dress, I was wearing the suit. Although, you know what? I think I'd look pretty hot in a dress. You can actually ride around the entire island in a little over an hour or less if you really push it, and you know, that's quite a fun adventure as well. And if you're worried about getting all hot and sweaty, don't worry about it. That's pretty typical for this area, and that leads me into tip number 2. Protect yourself from the elements. It is hot here, as in really hot, particularly in the summer months, but even in the cooler months of the winter, the sun can still be quite intense, and since you'll probably be spending most of your time outside, don't forget sunscreen and a good hat. If you'll be doing a lot of snorkeling, and seriously, why wouldn't you be? Consider wearing a rasher that will protect your skin from the sun as well as from anything else you may brush up against. Also, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Key West is a great party town, and in addition to all the sun, there's plenty of alcohol to enjoy. So add late nights of partying to long days of fun in the sun, and that is a serious recipe for big time dehydration. So make sure you're staying hydrated and drink enough water. And it's not just the sun, wear insect repellent. The Keys are home to approximately 46 species of mosquitoes. I'm sorry, how many? 46. And at least one of those species is a vector for Zika, dengue fever, and yellow fever. So yeah, try not to get bitten by one of those fuckers. And while it's totally cool and very much encouraged to kill mosquitoes, it is not cool to kill most of the other wildlife you'll find on the island, which is tip number 3. Florida Keys, and particularly Key West, are home to some very unique and interesting animals. Most of the sea life that isn't considered a fishing species is protected, so that means turtles, jellies, dolphins, and other sea life are protected. In fact, all of those animals are 100% wild, so it's a good idea to not mess around with them anyway. Any of the dolphin viewing tours that you can take will not let you in the water around the dolphins because they are completely wild and can actually be somewhat aggressive towards swimmers. Another animal that you'll see everywhere are the very unique Key West gypsy chickens. Originally brought to the island as part of a now illegal cockfighting industry, the no-kill policy of the island has caused this population to explode. You'll see them everywhere. They'll probably wake you up pretty much every morning. But make sure to leave them alone. You'll also see a bunch of iguanas, which are kind of cool, but can be a bit startling when they're hanging out on your balcony. And if you're wondering about alligators, don't worry, there are no alligators in Key West simply because alligators are a freshwater species and there just aren't enough large bodies of fresh water to sustain an alligator population. However, keep in mind that the American crocodile, which is a saltwater or brackish water species, do show up in the Keys and in Key West from time to time, so be very careful when you get in the water, particularly around canals and mangrove swamps that are their natural habitat. They're not as big of a threat to people, although they can be a threat to people. They're much more of a threat towards pets, dogs and things like that. So if you get your dogs in the water, because those more closely resemble their natural prey. So keep an eye out, not just for crocodiles, but for all of the wildlife, because it's wildlife and it's gonna do its thing. Tip number 4 is what to wear. Casual wear is fine. All the time. It's Florida. So unless you have a business meeting with a government agency or you have to go to court, heaven forbid, there's almost never a need for a suit or business attire when you're in Key West. Shorts, sundresses, sandals, bathing suits are pretty much all you're going to need. Think cool, comfortable, casual. You'll be getting hot, you'll be getting wet, you may be getting drunk, but there's rarely a need to dress up. The one exception? A wedding. That was the main reason we went to Key West to begin with, so if you're going to a wedding, you may need to bump it up a notch, or 3, but chances are it will still be more casual than a wedding in a big city. Tip number 5 is all about the beaches. You may have heard that there are no beaches in Key West, but that's simply not true. Now, it is true that there aren't a ton of really large beaches. In fact, those that are here are somewhat small and several are private. In other words, they're part of a private resort or part of a private property like a condominium complex, but you can certainly get some good beach time in here in Key West. However, keep in mind that the geology of the Keys and the surrounding ocean floor makes it difficult for sand to form, so much of the sand you see on Key West beaches is man-made or hauled in from elsewhere. And because of the Atlantic Barrier Reef and the slow drop-off in depth as you proceed to shore, there really isn't a good opportunity for good surf waves to form, so leave the surfboard at home. So those are the top 5 tips that I think you should know before going to Key West, but as promised, here's a bonus tip. Keep an eye out for cruise ships. These monstrosities dock with regularity and will disgorge thousands of passengers looking to hit up all of the top spots in Key West in a single day. So don't be surprised to see a massive influx of cruisers hitting all of your favorite spots and taking up all of the tables at the restaurants closest to the dock. If you know a ship is coming in, do your best to hit your destinations early in the day, or better yet, wait until after sundown because the ships have to leave before the sun sets. And remember that one of the coolest things about Key West is that it's one of the few places in the US where you can watch the sun rise and set from the same place on the same day. It's a stunning location. I loved my time in Key West and I hope you do as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, travel safe and I'll see you soon.